The State of Real Estate with your host, Jerry Lantain.
Welcome. That is indeed me. I am your host, Jerry Lantain. And today we are going to be speaking about appraisals with Ron House from Lakeland Appraisals. It's going to be a very good episode. We should learn a lot of information. But first, the market report. Today's stats are going to cover April 2021 versus April 2022, and they are brought to you by the Lakeland Association of Realtors. The average price between this April and last April has gone up by 26.4%. That's incredible. New listings have gone down by almost the same amount, by just over 23%. Inventory of homes for sale is down from last year by 20%. So there's a lot less out on the market for people to buy. Actual sales are also down, and they're down by 36%. So that means there's a lot less people buying right now. Could be buyer's fatigue, could be a lot of other reasons going on. The original price that people are getting for their house, the percentage of that is actually still a little over asking. People are getting generally on average 1% over asking still. So it's still a very seller's market out there. And days on the market. Last April, it took 9 days to sell a home. This year, the average is 8 days. So it's still a hot market. But in the last couple of weeks, some interesting things are happening. It does seem that homes are not getting as many showings as they were previously. And in lieu of the fact that interest rates are going to be going up incrementally, probably in June, it looks like some people are starting to back away. So the seller's market is still strongly a seller's market, but buyers are going to get a bit of a break soon and might have some better luck. Thank you very much. That's a market report. We'll be back with Mr. House. All right, welcome back. And you just finished with the market report. And as promised today, we are going to speak about appraisals with Mr. Ron House from Lakeland Appraisals.
Correct, sir.
Okay. Now, what is an appraisal? That's a loaded question.
Well, you should know, Jerry. You're in real estate. Well, appraisals are usually done when somebody is purchasing a property. They need the appraisal for their financing, whether it's a mortgage or a line of credit. Or appraisals are done for people to determine market value, or they're done for estate purposes, or they're done just because they need it for their own records, for their own finances. Most appraisals, like us, we're residential appraisers, and the vast majority of the appraisals we do are for the major lenders, the banks, the trust companies, and the credit unions, and we mainly work in this area, but they're from all the lenders from all across Canada, and I would say 90% of our appraisals are from the major banks and lenders in Canada and in Ontario.
Okay. So at what point in a transaction is the bank gonna want an appraisal done on a house? Now we're just gonna be, for instance, if we're doing a brand new house, I just bought a new house, I need a mortgage on it. So at what point is the bank gonna say, well, we need to verify some facts here?
Well, I think that happens when you've gone into the bank or you've been approved by the bank for the property. They know the amount of money you require to make the deal, and they basically then, over the last number of years, they have to send it to their head office, and once it's approved by head office, that's when they kick in the appraisal. And the appraisal business changed a number of years ago. It used to be where the bank manager would go down, call up the local real estate person or whatever, and say, we need an appraisal on Jerry's house, and the value is X number of dollars. Well, there's appraisal management companies came in about 25 years ago in Canada and in Ontario, and my first dealings with them was in the 90s, I guess, in the 2000s, early 2000s, I'm sorry. And so all the banks now have appraisal management companies that they deal with. So the bank usually doesn't contact my company directly. They go to one of the appraisal management companies, who then we are on their approved list, or we have a contract with them in the area, and then they send us an email, whatever, and saying, we need an appraisal on Jerry's place on Burnell Road, and and we want it complete, and we need it by, May the 10th.
So basically, we're establishing a value of the house itself,
Well, the land.
the property,
Yeah.
and are we like worried about any, like, does the finish inside of a house make a big difference in an appraisal?
Yes, it does. It's so when the appraisals are done basically on a combination of the land and the building. Okay, so if you've got a 1,000 square foot house, it's going to be worth X number of dollars. If you've got a 2,000 square foot house, it's going to be worth obviously more. If you've got a lot of 50 by 120 foot lot, it's worth say $150,000. Where your 200 by 200 foot lot could easily be worth in today's market $300,000.
Yeah.
So the combination together, and how the appraisals are done is on the sales generally is on the sales comparison approach. So you look for instance, if you're doing an appraisal on a 1,200 square foot bungalow in town, then you look for sales of similar age, similar quality, similar square footage type homes in relatively similar locations. Now, Muskoka isn't quite like dealing with the GTA area.
Like a large subdivision.
Yeah, like we don't have a lot of large subdivisions, but here you would, if for instance in Huntsville, if you were purchasing that 1,200 square foot split entry bungalow, then we would look for sales of similar type properties in the various developments in Huntsville or subdivisions, within, a couple miles of the downtown core. And then certain subdivisions, as you know, are more desirable. So then we would adjust the land value for that, and we adjust the land value for size, location, and if there's any adverse influences also, like such as
big factory across the
well,
road.
yes, or if you backed onto Highway 11,
Yeah.
or you front onto Highway 60, they call that, and traffic issues, etc. So it's things that you adjust for things like that would make someone want or not want the place. If you got a home that backs onto parkland and you got nobody behind you, that's a positive factor.
Yeah.
If you back onto Highway 11, well, that's the negative factor.
Is there, in terms of a traffic situation, is there a standard value that you can say, well, that's going to take this much away from that property because it is on a busy road? Or
No, there's not really a standard because each situation is different. And excuse me, you have to look at sales. For instance, if you see a sale that backs onto Highway 11, a home that sells for say 700,000, and one that's just down the road from it but backs onto parkland, and it's the same type of home, goes for 800,000.
Right.
Well, that sort of pretty well tells you that one lot's worth 100,000 more than the other lot.
right.
So no, each situation is different.
Okay. Now, so we're comparing other homes in the neighborhood, similar this, similar that, land size and stuff. What about a physical inspection of the home? Is that a necessary thing?
Yes, when most appraisals we do are called a full appraisal, and with a full appraisal, and the banks and the management companies over those, they expect you to do an exterior inspection, exterior measurements. So when you measure the outside of the home, you take the outside measurements for the square footage, and then after you do that, or before, it doesn't matter, you then arrange with the owner or the real estate person, whatever, if it's a sale, or the owner, you arrange to go inside and do a physical inspection of the property. Plus, they want a number of pictures, like interior pictures. They generally want a picture of every bedroom, generally every room in the house.
Yeah.
They want a picture of. They also quite often want a picture of the furnace room, the furnace and utilities. The panel box is a bigger one, especially in older homes. They want to make sure the panel box is breakers instead of fuses. Yeah. There's another thing that the banks and I think insurance companies are concerned about too is oil. If oil heat,
absolutely,
yeah, because that is coming more of an issue. And I have talked
with
to
leaky tanks and where the tank is situated in the house, out of the house.
And so what we do now is, if I come in here and say, okay, Jerry, what do you heat with? And you say, well, oil. Okay, thank you, that's good. Where's your tank? Well,
in the basement.
It's in the basement there. But you tell me, oh, but it's new 5 days ago or 5 years ago. So yeah, you've seen the new tanks now. They look like armored cars almost.
Yeah.
But anyways, so we take a picture of that tank and basically say, tank appears to be, according to the owner, the tank is 5 years old and appears to be in good condition.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've heard a lot of lenders over the last little while being concerned of oil heat and oil tanks.
So is your appraisal inspection, is that as in-depth as like a home inspector?
No, and we're not qualified to do that. We're just basically going through the home, we're taking pictures, we're noting the conditions. Like for instance, if the home is 20 years old and nothing's been done to it in those 20 years, we'll note those factors, like the place looks dated, it needs new, the carpet's worn, the entryway, the sheet vinyl in the entryway is worn, the roof looks like it's, original roof and Métis. So that affects our value.
Okay.
So we use depreciation on that. So we depreciate it for those factors.
Okay.
And again, every one of those is different.
Okay. Well, this is a good time to take a bit of a break, so we will. We have some commercials coming up, and we'll be back with Mr. House and talking more about appraisals after these messages.
The State of Real Estate with your host, Jerry Lantain. The State of Real Estate with your host, Jerry Lantain.
All right, welcome back, and this is the second half of the episode, and we are really lucky to have Mr. House because he's a professional about appraisals, and this is really good. I'm learning stuff too. Don't tell anybody.
I won't tell anybody.
Yeah. So let's just get back to appraisals. I want to get back to the physical inspection for a second. So you're going to go around the house, and you're going to decide.
And you're going to measure it counterclockwise, because then you're reading the tape the right way up.
Aha.
If you're doing it the other way, you're reading the tape upside down, and you can easily make a mistake.
That's been my problem because I have to twist it the other way to get my read on it.
Oh yeah, yes, I got taught that by an older gentleman years ago.
So if you were to go around a house and notice that there's some cracks in the foundation cinder blocks, is that a huge red flag?
We would note that out and take a picture of it.
Okay.
We're not engineers, we're not building inspectors, but we would make a note of that. And then, and obviously look inside for that too, if it shows right through.
Yeah.
It may just be, superficial or whatever, but, we do make a note of that. And then but like I said, we're not home inspectors or we're not engineers.
And then I'll just go another quick thing about physical. Inside the house, if you happen to, if the house happens to have like gorgeous marble countertops, is that also a consideration, or is that just a cosmetic thing that really doesn't up the value or up an appraisal?
About stuff like new kitchens and all that is they might add value to it, but they also make it sell better, sell quicker, and make it more attractive to the sale. Okay. Whether it adds whether a marble top or a granite top adds an awful lot of money over an ordinary top. Usually in a dwelling like that, a number of things add up, high-end stuff that makes the value higher.
Okay. Now I want to sort of switch the topic completely, and I want to sort of talk about like a market value of a house versus an appraisal value, and what happens when there's a discrepancy between that price.
Well, the appraisal that is being done by a certified appraiser is based on history. So it's based on sales that have taken place. So for instance, if I was doing an appraisal on the place across the road there down the street, and it was effective today's date, we'd be looking at sales that have taken place, as I said, using history. So we come up with our value based on history, and we have to, like I said before, we're doing it based on similar type homes that have sold, and we try to get the most recent sales we can. And if we have to go back farther, then we adjust them for time and market conditions. So if the market's improved 20% from last September, then we would adjust those sales by 20%. Now, a real estate agent going in and giving an opinion of value, I may do an appraisal, let's backtrack a bit, based on the sales comparison approach and say that that place is worth $1 million. You may go and look at it as an agent and say, I think I can get you $1.1 million for it, which you may. It doesn't prove that either one of us are wrong, because my appraisal, as I said, was based on history and based on sales that have taken place. And if that place then sells for $1.1 million instead of $1 million, you're creating more history.
Yeah.
And
and
in a market like we've had the last couple of years,
oh yeah,
you know,
you have to look to last week, not last month.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you can do. We had an interesting one where the property sold for in town, sold for this is last year. It had sold in the fall for X number of dollars, and then we're doing the appraisal on it 6 months later because it was a long closing and the bank didn't order the appraisal till 6 months later, and my appraiser lady said to me, she says, I'm coming out at $100,000 higher than it sold for. And I said, yeah, because we're 6 months later down the line and the market's a hell of a lot stronger.
Right. Well,
Yep.
Well, can you explain what happens when the opposite takes place in terms of, I've got a home, it's $700,000, and I'm going to take a mortgage out, and I get approved for that mortgage, but the appraisal comes back and says it's not worth 700, it's only worth 650.
Well, I think, as I said before, the appraisal is based on history, what has taken place. And yes, you could say your home's worth 700, and like we just talked about a minute ago.
Well, what happens if someone actually bought it already? They're planning to pay 700. The bank orders an appraisal, and the appraisal says, well, it's not worth 7, it's worth 650.
Well, then the appraiser is getting phone calls and emails
from angry people saying,
well, no, from the banker. The lender
Okay.
is mainly the one. Sometimes there's reasons for that. For instance, in a market like we've had recently, you might see a sale in an area where everything in the area is selling for between 650 and 700,000. Somebody comes along and they've missed out on some places they put offers on. They go in at, I don't know, $790,000, and the highest sale in that development is
Nowhere near that,
700,000 or 720 or whatever.
Yeah.
So we in our appraisal cannot match that. You know, we're not gonna just put ourselves out on the limb, because we need those sales. We need that history to say, okay, it's worth that money. But if all our sales say it's worth 700, that's what we bring the value in at. You know, and you know, and there's other factors that.
That's an interesting question. What's the risk and or liability on your end if an appraisal was under or valued or overvalued? I mean, what's that matter to the bank?
Well, I think the banks really want somebody's signature on the appraisal or on a piece of paper to say that it's worth X number of dollars, because that's passing the liability to you know who.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we come in lower than the appraised value, than the sale value, for instance, then obviously the person buying has to come up with more money.
Yeah, they have to pony up the difference in cash. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, which can be very hard, and that can actually end up being a deal breaker in some cases.
Yeah, and we've had a number of appraisals over the last couple of years, especially when the market's been changing day to day and week to week or whatever, that you know, we do not have the market data to support that sale value.
Can an appraisal be disputed?
Yes.
Does it oftentimes just end up being the same appraisal from a different company, or I mean, because a fact's a fact, right?
Well, they can go out and they would first come back to me and or to our company, my company, and then it usually ends up on my plate. And so if it's one of my other appraisers that's done it, and we review it, and I review most of the appraisals that go out of here anyway that we complete, that my company completes. So you know, we look at it, and yeah, people can make mistakes. So I mean, I don't just say, oh no, we're right. You know, we look at it, I talk about it. If I've done it myself, then I know, and you know, and we look and say, well, geez, were we wrong? Were the measurements wrong? You know, or did we do something wrong? And if we go through it and everything on our part we feel is correct, or I feel is correct, then we get back to them and say, oh, I'm sorry, our value stands.
Yeah.
And they can file a formal appeal on it, but again, I go through the same process, and our value stands. So they can then, it's up to them, they can go hire another appraisal firm.
Is there anything a homeowner can do to increase the value in an appraisal? Like in I know you could redo your kitchen, redo this, but are there small things that you can do to change that appraisal? Like, or is it too late by the time the bank's called you? There's not going to be enough time before a home closes to have somebody do something that's going to dramatically affect the appraisal value.
No, I don't think so. I mean, the biggest thing, and whether you're going to do an appraisal on it, or whether you're going to look at it as an agent, or whether as an agent you're taking people to show the place. I mean, the first impressions mean a lot. You know, if you come to a place and it's well manicured and it's well maintained on the outside, usually it's the same way inside.
Right. That's very true.
Yeah. So, you know, you look around at places, and you know, there are places around that are older, but they look like they're brand new.
Yeah.
You know, so really, nobody, you know, they can make their place look respectable. I guess every place looks respectable, but they can make it look nice and whatever. But there's really nothing a homeowner is going to do that's going to really affect our value, because, like I said before, we base it on the square footage, the quality, the finish, the condition, and the previous sales and the neighborhood where the subject's located in, and the value. And myself, I you know, we're all members of the real estate board, and I am on the board probably 3 or 4 times a day reviewing what is sold and what has happened. And so you've got to keep on top of that, and that gives you a good idea what the market is current,
right,
and what has happened, what's for sale, you know, what is happening, and that also gives you a good indicator as to that lot value we were talking about. Because you see those lots go by and what are selling. Like I had another thing that's really increasing in value, and you probably know this too, is rural lots and parcels of land.
I had a lot that put it up for sale, and it got $100,000 over what we were asking for it, and my client was happier than heck, and I was baffled. But these people saw the property and they said, "This speaks to us. We want to build a home here."
You wouldn't accept the commission on that additional amount, though?
No, only the list price.
Sorry.
No, that's good. So there are other reasons for an appraisal. Perhaps down the road we can do another interview, Mr.
Sure.
House.
Be my pleasure.
Well, Ron, thank you very much.
Yeah, call me Ron.
Yeah. And Ron, can you please tell these people how to get a hold of you?
Well, it's Lakeland Appraisals, and I'm the owner, Ron House, and we're in the phone book, and we're on the Yellow Pages, and we're on the internet, and etc.
Perfect.
789-2300.
All right, and this week's tip of the week is courtesy of Mr. Ron House, and that is, when you are measuring a house, measure it counterclockwise. Apparently, you'll be able to read the tape measure every time. I like it. You should too.
The State of Real Estate with your host, Jerry Lantain.